He is an American legend, the creator of the greatest show on earth. For half a century, P.T. Barnum unveiled the rare, the curious, the beautiful, the awesome. But he's also remembered as a self-serving huckster, a cynical defrauder of the American public. Here in this attic of memory is evidence of the real man, tough and at the same time surprisingly sensitive to criticism. A self-promoter, yet also extraordinarily private. A reader of people who had trouble reading his own self. An exploiter of human beings for profit, yet more decent than virtually any of his show business contemporaries. Throughout his ingenious career, he set the tone for American entertainment ever since. Here is both the very public showman and the very private man, P.T. Barnum.
Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
Phineas T. Barnum once said, "I want you to quote me as believing thoroughly in the future of the American circus, an institution so American as the circus will not die out." His hallmark was to continually surprise and amaze his audience, to get them talking. He didn't invent the circus, but it was Barnum who turned it into the greatest show on earth.
The circus is still a very powerful mythic form in America. It links people to their childhood, it links people to their fantasies, and Barnum, rightly or wrongly, is the central circus figure. If you name one person after the circus, if it's the Rorschach test, you say circus, and come up with a name, Barnum is the name you come up with. So that's a linkage to animals, to clowns, to acrobats, to danger, to fantasy and adventure, to childhood, to dreams that are not governed by necessity. I think that's what Barnum opens up.
What few remember is that for most of his life, Barnum was not a circus man at all, but the owner of a curious museum in the heart of New York City. Everything Barnum brought to the circus had its origins here. It was the laboratory in which P.T. Barnum created himself. It was his circus tent, they said, built of brick instead of canvas. He had acquired the musty old American Museum on Broadway in 1841 and rapidly transformed it into an amusement park, an art gallery, a theater and zoo, all packed into a 5-story building.
The American Museum was the ladder by which I rose to fortune. I do not believe there was ever a more truly popular place of amusement.
A brass band performed on the museum balcony. Their loud, off-key playing, Barnum liked to boast, actually drove people inside to get away from the music. And in an unprecedented move, he decorated his building with huge pictures of wild animals.
Strangers would look at the many animals on the outside of the building and argue that there must be something on the inside. And in they would go to see.
Once in, Barnum had them, displaying 500,000 things to wonder at. As in his circus, one of his hallmarks was to have almost too much to see, too much going on, and no one ever knew what was real and what was fake. Here was the nation's only complete mastodon skeleton, also a two-headed calf, a horned toad in a jar, and a scorpion. There was an authentic Egyptian mummy, the first ever displayed in America, but also a common bird nest, ordinary rocks, and a honeycomb. Barnum liked to keep his audiences guessing. It was part of the fun. Every ingredient of Barnum's circus had its start here. Trapeze artist? At Barnum's museum, child acrobats performed on aerial swings. Clowns? Stand-up comics entertained on Barnum's stage. And there were always practical jokes. Barnum's man-eating chicken turned out to be simply a man eating chicken. Elephants and wild animals? Barnum was the first to import a herd of elephants to America. And on the museum's top floor, dangerous cats obeyed the commands of Herr Jacob Griesbach. The museum was a kind of circus in embryo. Strong men showed off their muscles and wrestled in public. There was a contortionist to amaze the passing crowds, and on one floor, ventriloquists astounded audiences with large talking puppets. In a huge three-story theater, Barnum invented the concept of a matinee show. He presented America's first national beauty pageant. There was an annual baby contest with prizes for the cutest and the fattest. And to attract people from outside of the city, Barnum even concocted an indoor country fair.
I am now in the midst of our poultry show. 8,000 chickens in the museum. Gods, what a crowing.
Even his circus sideshow had its origins at the museum. Barnum's lifelong obsession was with the people he called his living curiosities. To the public, they were simply freaks. And whenever the showman was concerned that their looks in themselves weren't outrageous enough to draw in a crowd, he had no trouble embellishing them with outlandish stories. His posters advertised the curious-looking family he claimed were the white offspring of black Madagascar parents. In reality, they were Dutch-speaking albinos named the Luccheses. An infant with a tumorous growth on its head was recast as Barnum's double-brained baby, and a black youngster with a skin condition Barnum ballyhooed as the leopard boy.
Is it real or is it humbug? That's just the question. Persons who pay their money at the door have a right to form their own opinions.
Ever since childhood, Barnum seemed compelled to play hoaxes. It had all started back in the Connecticut village where Barnum was raised in a family of storekeepers.
I was born in the town of Bethel, Connecticut, in an old-fashioned house on Elm Street.
It was a deed for 5 acres of Connecticut land that helped turn the boy into a lifelong hoaxer. At birth, his grandfather gave him a gift called Ivy Island. Real estate supposedly worth a fortune. It turned out to be a huge family joke. And 12 years after receiving the gift on his first visit to the property, Barnum saw for himself it was nothing but a worthless piece of swampland.
The truth rushed upon me. I had been made a fool of for more than a half a dozen years.
The episode toughened the boy and made practical joke playing a lifelong obsession. In 1835, carefully placed advertisements announced Barnum's own first big humbug. He presented to the public an old slave woman said to have nursed George Washington in infancy, and supposedly 161 years old. An autopsy later proved Joyce Heth was barely 80. 7 years later, Barnum hoaxed the public again with what was purported to be a mermaid. In reality, it was a hideous-looking dead concoction, half primate, half fish. The whole city showed up to see Barnum's wonder, and when the hoax was unveiled, Barnum dubbed himself the Prince of Humbugs.
The interesting thing about his publicity in regard to the Fiji mermaid is that he invited skepticism. He didn't try to sell it as a bona fide object. Barnum never said, "There's a sucker born every minute," and every biographer of him to date has made that point.
The mermaid and the other humbugs were used by me as skyrockets, or advertisements to attract attention and give notoriety to the museum. I don't believe in duping the public. I believe in attracting them and then pleasing them.
Little did Barnum know his ability to both hoax and please the public was about to increase 100-fold. For just a year after his purchase of the American Museum, he would discover Tom Thumb.
This presentation of P.T. Barnum is sponsored in part by Campbell's Home Cookin' Soups, CompuServe online service, and by Lincoln Mercury and the complete line of 1996 Lincoln and Mercury automobiles.
In the mood for something wild? Have a Fiesta from Campbell's. The soup with a spicy mix of rousing rice, colorful carrots, and the pizzazz of sweet red peppers. You'll fall for the flavor.
According to most building codes, what kind of support is needed under a load-bearing wall?
It's a huge, huge amount of support. You can't even imagine, because the tonnage that it would take to just would fall through. You'd have to protect yourself.
Sometimes life calls for deeper answers. That's why there's CompuServe. No online service has more informed user groups, more comprehensive databases, and better access to the internet. Enter CompuServe. Call for free software in 10 free hours online.
Imagine an automobile engineered to such precise tolerances, it feels as if it were formed from a single piece of steel. Introducing the all-new 1996 Mercury Sable. The all-new Mercury Sable. Imagine something better.
Imagine yourself in a Mercury.
Beginning tonight on Wild Discovery. They're big, real big, giant, and they're headed your way. Watch out. Throw your weight around. Weigh in with nature's giants on Wild Discovery. Beginning tonight at 1 Mountain, 12 Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
Do you love... So I asked the guy, what do you do for excitement around here? Flips me the keys to a new Grand Am. Says it's like surfing on asphalt. Whoa, radical. He says, nah, it's rational. Dual airbags, air, automatic, cassette, ABS, it's loaded. Then he gets to the price. Didn't wipe me out. Thousands less than the import, guys. The new value price Grand Am. Catch it at your Pontiac Excitement Network dealer today.
You gotta go cellular. Sure, you can check things out at those other guys, but you want honest answers from honest guys who know their stuff.
Yeah.
Cellular Depot. Don't just wonder if it's right for you. Get educated. Ask anything you want to know.
What's the capital of Rhode Island?
About cellular phones, cellular service pagers. Get the Mitsubishi Diamond Tel for only $25 with service activation. Connecting people. Cellular Depot. Rohnert Park in the Walmart Plaza.
In November 1842, Barnum made a find that would seal his fame forever. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, he was shown a tiny 4-year-old boy who had not grown an inch since he was 6 months old.
He was the smallest child I ever saw that could walk alone. He was not 2 feet in height and weighed less than 16 pounds. His name was Charles S. Stratton.
Agreeing on $3 a week for their son's services, Charlie's father, Sherwood, did the signing of Barnum's hastily drawn-up contract. His illiterate wife, Cynthia, then added an X.
I took great pains to train my diminutive protege, devoting many hours to that purpose by day and night. And I succeeded. I succeeded because he had native talent and an intensive love of the ludicrous.
Barnum taught Charlie to sing and to dance and to strike elaborate costume poses. Fine miniature clothing was handmade especially for him to help turn the youngster into a little gentleman. In a stroke of genius, Barnum renamed the boy General Tom Thumb and increased his age to make a more believable midget out of him. Finally, the showman and his prize were ready to go public.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am only a thumb, but a good hand in a general way at amusing you. Though a mite, I am mighty. In short, don't make much of me, for making more would be making me less. Though I grow in your favor, no taller would I want to be.
The puns were pure Barnum, his kind of humor, and so were the stage directions. By placing the general beside a very small child, Barnum amazed audiences by showing just how small Tom Thumb really was.
Will some little boy step on stage for a moment?
Mr. Barnum, I would rather have a little miss.
Slyly, Barnum emphasized Thumb's sexual nature, describing him as a boiled-down version of manhood. With Tom, forbidden behavior was somehow acceptable. Women in Barnum's audiences were encouraged to respond to his advances.
His act was to flirt with the women in the audience and to ask to be kissed and to say that he loved them all and how many kisses he had from the audience. And so he went on and on about that. That was a whole peculiar, pre-Freudian little act that they were into there.
In fact, many of Barnum's living curiosities were exhibitions of the erotic. Beginning with the much-touted Madame Josephine Clofulia, Barnum intrigued audiences with a parade of sexually androgynous bearded ladies. Barnum's bearded women blurred the lines of the era's normally rigid sex roles. But of all of his curiosities, Barnum's man-child Tom Thumb was the favorite, eventually claiming he had kissed or been kissed by more than 1 million women. With the showman controlling his every move, Tom Thumb became the most famous midget of all time, viewed by more people in America than any actor of the century. So successful was he, Barnum decided to take his dashing, diminutive charge to Europe. Everyone had told Barnum that the British would have no interest in Tom Thumb and that the Queen would never see him. But Barnum bowled ahead and finally engineered a royal invitation.
We were conducted through a long corridor to a broad flight of marble steps, which led to the Queen's magnificent picture gallery.
It was the opportunity of a lifetime. A command performance for Tom Thumb before Queen Victoria.
No description can give an idea of this little creature. He is American and gave us his card with General Tom Thumb written on it. He made the funniest little bow, putting out his hand and saying, "Much obliged, ma'am."
The visit to Queen Victoria made Barnum's the most popular act in England.
everything goes smooth as oil. At the fashionable hour, between 50 and 60 carriages of the nobility may be counted standing in front of our exhibition row in Piccadilly. The general is in capital spirits, improves every moment, and don't grow a hair.
To attract even more attention, Barnum had a miniature carriage constructed.
His carriage, ponies, and servants in livery will kill the public dead. It will be the greatest hit in the universe. See if it ain't.
Although still just a boy, Tom Thumb reveled in his role, drinking brandy, smoking cigars, and entertaining Barnum's friends with a very adult sense of humor. As Tom required less and less of his time, Barnum began a search for novelties to send back to his museum. In Lancashire, he discovered a group of English bell ringers.
I have made them Swiss and hired them at a roaring price.
At a country fair, his keen eye spotted a strange group of animals, hawks, mice, cats, birds, and snakes, coexisting in a single cage. He called his new acquisition the Happy Family. And in London, he acquired a remarkable talking machine, capable of producing distinct words in 3 languages. As Barnum traveled through Europe, his self-confidence was building. In an era when a good salary was $200 a year, the showman was making $500 a day off of Tom Thumb. Decisions came easier now. A daringness of spirit could be detected in his quick smile and easy swagger. In France, Barnum and Thumb were invited 4 times to the royal palace of the Tuileries. Barnum fell in love with everything French. "I never was so happy in my life," he wrote in a letter. Paris, he said, would be better named Paradise. Back home, Barnum's wife, Charity, raised their 3 children alone. In a decade when the feminist movement in America was first taking shape, Charity was a New England-born homebody who preferred work in the garden to traveling around the world.
Barnum's wife, Charity, has remained pretty much an enigma. She's often depicted as being a sanctimonious shrew. Contemporaries of Charity comment on her own sense of humor and her own ready tongue and wit, and I think she was just about as fun-loving as Barnum was.
In November 1844, following almost a year's separation, Charity Barnum joined her husband in the midst of his 3-year foreign tour. In Europe, much of their time together was highly enjoyable, but the stresses and strains of marriage to a traveling showman had begun to wear Charity down. Now at Barnum's side, Charity cramped her husband's new style, disapproving of many of the things he relished.
The very first dinner party we attended, every person drank wine, even the ladies. And I am sure that some of the gentlemen drank a quart apiece. The whole party then commenced gambling for money.
Charity called the French wicked and unprincipled. The French theater, she said, was obscene.
It is the most vulgar place I ever visited. Every one of the half-naked trollops who come out upon the stage to show their legs and expose themselves ought to be horsewhipped.
I had no desire to enter into an argument with the lady, for I knew I should be combating prejudices of quite too long standing to be removed.
In June 1845, a pregnant Charity Barnum sailed back to America, leaving behind her showman husband. Her departure would be followed by the most selfish period of Barnum's entire life.
More paste, thick, and chunky salsa. Here.
This ain't paste, thick and chunky salsa.
So? Paste has got big chunks of tomatoes, onions, and peppers. Perfect for dipping.
And it's made in San Antonio, for folks who know what salsas taste like.
This stuff's made in New York City.
New York City? Pick up the thick and chunky one. Pick up the paste.
Animal.
As Charlie sat wedged between the fleshy flyers, staring remorsefully at the no smoking sign, he kicked himself for having left his Wrigley spearmint gum in the change tray at the X-ray machine. Suddenly, he remembered he had another stick. Yearning for that cool, clean spearmint taste, that pure chewing satisfaction, he reached into his pocket. Not there. Then he saw it, beckoning him from the cuff of his pant. But his tray table was down, mocking him.
When you can't smoke, don't forget your Wrigley spearmint.
The Lincoln Continental has been so intelligently designed, it can actually read. Sensors mounted on each wheel continuously monitor road conditions. If even the slightest change is detected, the suspension can adjust in milliseconds for smoother, more precise control. So, read any good roads lately? The 32-valve Lincoln Continental with the V8 Intech system. What a luxury car should be.
Explore the wonders of the world's longest river through the power of multimedia with Nile Passage to Egypt CD-ROM. Set sail in your own traditional sailing vessel and travel from Uganda to Egypt with over 30 minutes of full-motion video, hundreds of photographs, and 5 repeatable game sequences. It's a rewarding journey for the whole family. Call now to order Nile Passage to Egypt CD-ROM for only $39.95 and receive a free Nile mouse pad. 1-800-641-6644.
Hear the stories of the real Wyatt Earp. Meet the gunfighters of the Wild West on Time Traveler. Thursday at 11 Mountain, 10 Pacific, only on the Discovery Channel.
With charity gone, Barnum began testing the limits of his newly found freedom in Paris. Soaking in the sights, washing down lunches and dinners with wine, he played the part of a giddy tourist. But it was more than just sightseeing. Barnum was breaking free from the strict rules of his past. And as he moved along back roads in Brittany like a bohemian, with an eye for pretty women wherever he went, his drinking became heavier and heavier. Without knowing it, the young showman was losing control to alcohol. And with a brash money-will-open-any-door philosophy, he was becoming the incarnation of the ugly American.
Barnum represented to some Europeans American qualities writ large. The braggadocio, the scale, the exaggeration. This is what Yankees supposedly were like. And if you didn't like it, you didn't like Barnum.
To a more refined and cultured society, he must have seemed, as he was, egotistical, brash, crude, and perhaps he's really, really repulsively so to many people.
To Charity, Barnum certainly was not repulsive, but he was becoming exasperatingly insensitive towards her. In his supposedly humorous letters written for the New York Atlas, he continued to mock her nervousness and conservatism and called her an old maid. And when another daughter was born in March 1846, Barnum made no plans to go home. He did finally return to America 2 months later, but his visit went so badly, he abruptly cut it short and stormed back to Europe.
I never before experienced so much trouble, nay, misery, as I was forced to endure during my stay. If I believed I should be obliged to go through the same vexations and annoyances when I returned, I would never go back, by God.
The Niagara Falls trip was supposed to be a family vacation, a chance to start over and renew old bonds. The family was growing fast now. Barnum's oldest daughter, Caroline, was already a young woman. Helen was 7. Baby Pauline, just 1. Now, at the top of a slippery wooden staircase heading down into the falls, Charity was frightened.
Mother accompanied us, but when we came to the staircase that led down to the river, she determined she would not go. Father at last persuaded her to start. When she got about halfway down, she became very dizzy. We therefore left her alone.
With her head swirling and terrified of falling to her death, Charity desperately needed assistance. But Barnum was oblivious as he and his daughter went on and reveled in the falls. When they finally climbed up again, there was no sign of Charity anywhere.
We found when we got home that she had fainted on the stairs and was obliged to be conveyed up by some men.
It was the last straw. Another glaring example of Barnum's selfishness. His deepening insensitivities may have been caused in part by alcohol. Barnum had already renounced hard liquor, admitting in 1847 that he had a problem. But he still consumed a full bottle or more of wine each evening, which so affected him he was now incapable of working past noon. In late 1848, the minister Edwin H. Chapin arrived in Bridgeport to speak. His topic, the so-called moderate drinker, who consumes wine only and thus thinks himself safe. Among his listeners in the packed Universalist church was P.T. Barnum.
I warn you, in the light of all human experience, you are in danger and should give it up.
That night, Barnum could not sleep.
Barnum, you have gone too far in the miserable and ruinous habit. Yes, you are on a path fraught with imminent danger.
In the early hours of morning, Barnum descended into his wine cellars and poured the contents of every bottle onto the lawns.
I then called upon Mr. Chapin, asked for the teetotaler pledge, and signed.
It was the end of his drinking, and when Charity learned of it all, her pent-up anxiety and pain was unleashed. She broke down before her husband in tears. At his museum, which was now New York's #1 tourist attraction, temperance became Barnum's lifelong passion. He banned liquor from the premises, required his staff members to become teetotalers, staged a drama called The Drunkard, and invited audiences to sign a temperance pledge on their way out his doors.
I am going temperance strong, and I believe it is the most glorious cause on earth. My message is simple. The man who commences tippling is the last person in the world to discover his danger.
Beginning tonight on Wild Discovery. They're big, real big, giant, and they're headed your way. Watch out. Throw your weight around. Weigh in with nature's giants on Wild Discovery. Beginning tonight at 1 Mountain, 12 Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
More paste, thick, and chunky salsa. Here.
This ain't paste, thick and chunky salsa. So? Paste has got big chunks of tomatoes, onions, and peppers. Perfect for dipping.
And it's made in San Antonio, where folks know what salsas taste like. This stuff's made in New York City.
New York City? Pick up the thick and chunky one. Pick up the paste.
Animal.
Why are rebel forces in Peru fighting against the current government?
It's that guy with the beard. You know, the guy with the beard.
Sometimes life calls for deeper answers. That's why there's CompuServe. No online service has more informed user groups, more comprehensive databases, and better access to the internet. Enter CompuServe. Call for free software and 10 free hours online.
Discover the latest theories on how dinosaurs lived, what they ate, and what led to their eventual demise. Don't miss When Dinosaurs Ruled on Planet of Life. Tonight at 2 Mountain, 1 Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
From his balcony on Broadway, Barnum looked across at his venerable neighbor, St. Paul's Church. "40 years old now, Barnum continued to struggle with himself. Despite all his success, he was still known primarily as the money-hungry exhibitor of a dead mermaid and a bright dancing dwarf. Cornelius Vanderbilt's reaction upon first meeting him summed it all up when he exclaimed, "Why, I expected to see a monster. Part lion, part elephant, and a mixture of rhinoceros and tiger." While Barnum publicly insisted he liked such a persona, deep down he was bothered. What he needed now was a new public image. Proof to the world that he was not just a humbug. Then a bold idea struck. He would sponsor a tour by Europe's most dazzling singer, Jenny Lind. No one had ever heard a voice like Jenny Lind's before. The crystal-clear soprano known as the Swedish Nightingale had touched hearts and souls all over Europe. It would be a tremendous coup for the Showman to import such a lofty opera star.
I may not make money by this enterprise, but I assure you that if I knew I should not realize a farthing, I would yet ratify the engagement.
There never was a media event to that time like Jenny Lind's arrival in New York. There were between 30 and 40,000 people at the pier to meet her. And the festivities went on for seemingly endlessly.
On September the 11th, the first of Jenny's 95 Barnum-produced concerts took place at New York's Castle Garden. It was a staggering success, and the excitement only increased when Barnum appeared on stage to announce that the diva was donating her entire purse of $10,000 to New York charities. Barnum's management of the cross-country tour to follow was continually innovative.
Barnum was trying to create a different kind of public space from anything that people were used to. For instance, at Castle Garden, Barnum had different colored tickets. He had numbered seats. He had ushers with badges of different colors to indicate which section they were to lead people to. He had colored lanterns. He published a facsimile of the tickets in the newspapers. It was such a novel item to see. People were fascinated by the orderly way in which the audience was able to proceed to their seats.
Businesslike, resourceful, and restrained, Barnum was always in charge as he literally reshaped his own public image. In Washington at Willard's Hotel, he arranged for Jenny to be visited by President Millard Fillmore. City after city fell under the Lind spell. In Havana, where audiences were accustomed to Latin-style singers, Barnum watched Jenny convert a hissing, hostile crowd into an adoring audience.
When I witnessed her triumph, I could not restrain the tears of joy that rolled down my cheeks. "Are you satisfied?" she said, throwing her arms around my neck. She, too, was crying with joy. And never before did she look so beautiful in my eyes.
For almost a year, the Showman and star danced a strange ballet of opposites. She so dazzling, so dedicated to God, so generous, so protected and pampered. He so solid and plain beside her, the eternal optimist, the genial fast talker, the flagrant hawker. By the end of 1851, Barnum and Jenny Lind had grossed $712,000. $200,000 for her, $500,000 for him. Advised that her share was not high enough and that she was being treated like a circus act, Jenny canceled the tour 2/3 of the way through. But to the end of his life, Barnum kept a bust of Jenny Lind in his own private study, a reminder of their extraordinary year together. By now, Barnum was at the wealthiest point of his entire life. Money meant everything to him. He once told Jenny Lind, "The only music I like is the ring of American silver dollars." Barnum loved money not only for what it could buy him, but for the status it brought. Nowhere was this more evident than in the extraordinary home he had constructed in Fairfield, Connecticut. He called it Iranistan, 90 feet high with Turkish towers and minarets, the most palatial home in all America, a monument to his ever-growing ego.
It was built literally regardless of cost, and all I cared to know was that it suited me.
Here in a sumptuous private study in the year 1854, Barnum settled down to write his autobiography, The Life of P.T. Barnum, published the same year as Thoreau's classic Walden. It was Barnum's book that became an instant bestseller. But then something extraordinary happened. Barnum invested heavily in an enormous Connecticut clock manufacturer, and he personally guaranteed their debts. When the company suddenly failed in 1855, one of America's richest men lost everything. His fortune, his museum, his mansion. Iranistan was put on the market, and a bankrupt Barnum took his family to Long Island. He wandered the beaches, contemplating his future. His fall was humbling. As he searched his soul, the often brusque and arrogant showman took on a new decency.
The blow was a chastening. I deserved what I received. I'd placed too much confidence in mere money and my own personal efforts. And in my poverty and seclusion at the seaside with my family, I found more peace and contentment than Iranistan ever afforded me.
And then Barnum discovered how many true friends he still had, not least of whom was his old protege, Tom Thumb.
My dear Mr. Barnum, I understand your friends, and that means all creation, intend to get up some benefits for your family. Now, my dear sir, just be good enough to remember that I belong to that mighty crowd, and I must have a finger, or at least a thumb, in that pie.
To help dig Barnum out of debt, General Tom Thumb pulled out the old costumes and headed off once again to Europe on a grand repetition of his famous tour. Back to the royal courts they went, and Thumb was as popular as he had been 10 years earlier, once again with the showman alongside him. Barnum spent the closing years of the 1850s digging himself out of debt, slowly but surely paying off his creditors. He had weathered the worst storm of his life and had come through it a more reflective man. When news arrived in late 1857 that his still unsold mansion, Iranistan, had caught fire and burnt to the ground, Barnum reacted to the news with a newly stoical calm.
It was the only building in its style in America, and its loss was regarded as a public calamity. My beautiful Iranistan.